This is, as always, the Lydian Spin with Tim Dahl, and sneaking in the background is our good friend Sebastian El Grappler Greppo.
I like
Good to see
the
both of
rolling
you.
R, the rolling R.
Yeah, I got a tricky tongue if you hadn't noticed.
Whoa, hurricane tongue.
Well, I mean, Tim, on this day, because we always, do the intros whenever we do them,
Right.
September 11th. I don't even know what to say about that nightmare, and I don't think I'll get into it because it would take me another 10 years to explain my investigations. But a tragedy it was, and more tragedy in as far as the White House doing this dance around another murder by somebody that only spread hate and was, unfortunately, guns kill people, not people, as the Republicans like to
Well,
say.
he also said that in order to protect the Second Amendment, it's okay that people get killed because that's more important. And then, ironically, he was killed by someone who had easy access to a gun.
I
Um,
mean, I was looking for good news today, and I don't know why. I feel cheery. Reasons to be cheerful. One, two, three, as Ian Drury once said. I mean, I have a few in my own life, but in times like this, when things look so dark and so ridiculous, I mean, the only alternative is, as I always say, trying to find your pleasure where you can find it. Go hug a
sure.
friend, go kiss a plant, go pet a squirrel, hopefully not a rabid one. Hopefully not
Well,
one that, having these
it-
tentacles sprout out of their head from, contamination.
I guess what's really good about that advice is it gets you away from the screens, and political violence is super. It's increased like 83%. I mean, those Democrat representatives killed by that guy dressed up as a cop. I mean, Gabby Gifford was shot. I mean, there's just people just can't handle this social media thing, and they
Well,
really
and also
they're
here, I
going
mean, of
nuts.
course, uh, 1 million deaths are a statistic, one is a tragedy. But right now, there is war all the time, everywhere, never over, in so many places that, and the thing is, when it comes to America, one at a time, or the horrifying event of schoolyard shootings, which happens almost every week in this country,
Well,
I
it
mean,
happened yesterday. It happened yesterday in
it
Colorado.
happens almost every week, if not every day. Um, you know, oh, and civil. We are already in a uncivil war the world over, and it's just getting more outlandish.
Well,
And
the thing is, that was in yesterday's that assassination. Charlie Kirk, the that was in Utah, and Utah
yeah,
has some of the loosest gun laws. I mean, so they're always saying like, oh, we need people armed so we can, a good guy can kill a bad guy, wherever that fucking line is. Well,
well,
that didn't happen
the
yesterday.
problem is who is to decide. And at this point, I
Oh,
mean, I'll be the judge and jury, but I'm not going to bang the gavel at this
well,
point because,
that's another point I want to make because we're they're basically letting ICE be a judge, jury, and executioner. So this is like the message the White House is giving that this is acceptable, and then they cry when it backfires. No pun intended.
yeah. Well,
So
and let's face it, that a lot of the military that are being sent into these so-called sanctuary, really democratic-run cities are left to pick up trash and sweep the freaking highways because it's just so ridiculous and completely unorganized. It's just a blunder. It's everything is just a clown show blunder
well,
at the moment,
everything's
and
not to sound pessimistic because I'm actually an optimist in general,
so am
but
I.
but it's
Strangely,
but I it's all going to
there
get
is
worse.
hope, but not for us,
It's all going to get worse before it gets better. And I mean the
You want me to sing that lyric?
well
It's
the
gonna get
McKinsey
worse. It's gonna get better. I wish I
there's a,
could turn around and blow our blues away.
there was a McKinsey report that came out. I think it was like 2 years ago, and it's since been there's been other studies just to kind of challenge that and back it, and they all come to the same conclusion. Roughly around 30% of all jobs are going to be gone by 2030, and that's in basically 4 years. We're there. So, and then we have this kind of elderly Congress and the fucking doofus,
Who, by the way, are elderly yet do not respect the elders who are now going through the withdrawal of their Social Security, rising cost of everything because they're on the bankroll of every fucking lobbyist.
well,
I mean,
so
this
this
is
is
why we need to blow it up and start all over again.
it's the obvious point is the reason basically 30% of the jobs are going to be gone is because of AI. And so
I guess we beat that to the punch, Tim, because we are perpetually, impossibly unemployable, which is even as artists, hello, struggle, chin to the gutter.
Oh my God.
We have already, beat the trend by saying, you know what, employment. What the hell would we do?
So yeah, and then you have the cost of living. So last night, he was on the podcast, Eric Gardner, who's a LA session drummer, and he's like, oh, I'm coming through town. I'm playing with Melissa Etheridge, a pairing that no one would really expect me to be going, but I'm supporting my friend. So they're playing at Radio City, and he's got a couple of his buddies showing up, and one of them, this guy Randy, who's the drummer. Have you heard of this band called the Scissor Sisters? It's kind of like
yeah, of course, yeah, they've been around for a while.
Kind of like
they had a hit once,
neo Elton Johnish kind of thing. So they're back. I guess they took a 4 or 5 year break, and actually, this guy Randy played with you once. He told me because he was Jesse Malin's drummer, and you sat in once or whatever. Doesn't matter.
I don't. What? Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But the point is,
there's been a lot of tub thumpers behind me.
Well, the point is, he just played Madison Square Garden, and he's talking about moving to Nashville because New York's too expensive for him.
He's playing anywhere.
And he's playing Madison Square Garden. It's like,
I'm just flummoxed, but anyway, that's why on this episode, our 321st, we're actually putting up, because it has to be done. We've done all of these for free, educating the public as well as we can. That is our small minority of individuals who respect artists that are stubborn, relentless, and independent. We're putting up a PayPal button so that people can contribute something. Ooh. No donation, too small or too large. It would just be helpful because we do this, of course, we're going to continue, pay or no pay, like most of our creative endeavors. But, people might want to give $1, $5, $10, $500 just to help us keep this going. We're not going to stop, but it would be kind if somebody, whoever could, just afford to donate occasionally something.
A cool million.
That's all I'm saying is now it's the time to, lend a helping hand, because we're here to hope make each one of your lives a little brighter with our humorous take on the worldwide war and the devastation that we're all facing. So I'm just saying, I'm putting it up. You give or you don't give. I've been giving my whole fucking life. And you know what? I don't expect to get what I'm worth. But $1 or $2 here and there wouldn't hurt. Thank you. I'm just saying. Right?
Yes, sure. This is news to me, but I'm not going to reject that idea.
Got to do something here, because come on. All of this, it seems like it just rolls off the top of our head, but there's a lot of research to be done. And by the way, I'm very excited on this episode to have just one of the kindest, nicest, loveliest people on the musicians, a multi-instrumental composer, withstood a lot of torture and hell in his life and has a great book out, The Absence. Budgie, who was in the Banshees and the Creatures. I'm very excited to have him. The Slits and John Cale and a million other people. Kodo drumming and just really such a sweetheart. And the book is really great, and he'll be reading from that. So that's exciting. And God only knows what's going to come from the next 321 episodes. By that time, we'll just keep going.
Yes, we will.
Well, that's why it is. I think people should stop believing that everything is free on the internet. You've got to pay sometimes. Just come on, people. Send the dough.
People want everything.
Thank you, Sebastian. And once you learn how to do exactly what I've been inciting that you do for years, perhaps we'll all retire to the south of France eventually, although I see what happened to Budgie when he did that, so I'm a little bit worried about that.
Yeah, that didn't go so well.
That didn't go so well, but then again, no comment. Anyway, Tim Dahl, let's wrap this up, because you know what? I got shit to do. You got shit to do.
I do.
Sebastian is, of course, 6 hours ahead of us, and he's just here for the joyride of it all, as he always is. And I say with that, this is, and will, for as long as we can frickin' stand it, be the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch. Tim Dahl, Sebastian Greppo on the sidelines recording this. Our special guest, Budgie. Tim, I muted until you get on. Now I got to start again. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl from the outskirts of wherever he is. And one of the loveliest and most talented people I've ever met, and I'm not blowing any smoke, honey, because you're sitting on your heinies, so I couldn't do it anyway. Budgie, most notorious for his contribution to the first Slits record, the Banshees for many years, the Creatures, and many other things. But now we need to talk about not only an artist, a musician, a drummer, a guitar player, a composer, an arranger, now also an author of The Absence, Memoirs of a Banshee Drummer. Hi, Budgie.
Hi, Lydia. It's nice to see you.
So nice to see you. I was saying before we started recording that I remember when we were in a van, you had played maracas on Frankie Teardrop with Retrovirus somewhere.
It's the longest I've ever played maracas. Yes.
It was exhausting, I'm sure. And you were just talking about starting to do your memoir then and telling me a few stories. And I'm like, this has to be documented because I think memoirs are so very important. I like the truth. I like true stories. And I think the book is just very vulnerable and really fantastic. It's so unrock, yet details your time doing music. How is the book tour going?
Well, this is great because this is the first step back into book world for me. I did my first tour, a solo tour ever, just talking about me. And we started up in Glasgow and I went right round all 4 countries. Is it 4? Scotland, Ireland, England, Wales, of the British Isles. And had a blast. Little places, big places. And what's been great is digesting it all, finally hitting London and meeting the crew, meeting all the people who've helped me put this book together, from my editor, publisher. They're all named in the book. It's even Rupert Thompson, who's an author of many years' experience. I wrote him a fan letter when his first book was published. I think probably because he mentioned the band I was in that book. And I love the book. And we met for the first time. He used to live in Berlin. This is a really off the side story. And I wrote him a letter and he kept it. It was his first fan letter. And so we met for the first time 40 years.
Was that your first fan letter that you ever wrote?
I think it might have been. I might have written one to Mark Bolan, but it was the first one I thought I could actually
wait
maybe
a second.
contact.
I don't blame you for that. And then you played actually on a Peaches cover of a Mark Bolan song.
Oh,
we did love our Mark Bolan, didn't we? Oh my.
Solid Gold, Easy Action, I think it was.
Oh, God, bang a gong. I wrote a fan letter. Of course, back when we were teenagers, we used to occasionally write letters or postcards. And I remember I wrote a letter to Hawkwind, then became, of course, Motorhead. But by the time I got a response, and I did 6 months later, I was no longer into them. And I wrote a letter once to Wayne County. And then that was the first person off the Greyhound bus I met the second time I ran away to New York. And I'm okay, there we go. So
well, Wayne, then Jane, but certainly Wayne played Wayne named our first band Spitfire Boys.
Well, and we had a shared common enemy, Wayne, Jane, and I, which is just so bizarre. And another very weird fact is I saw Wayne, Jane, and Cherry Vanilla play at an uptown cabaret in like 73 the first time I ran away to New York. And just, but the whole thing is circular, and that's why we write our books. And
and then the memory gets clearer, and then other names pop in, and you go, who are they? Who's Vermilion? And then I remember Vermilion and Angry Young Women.
I was impressed with your recollections in The Absence. I'm just going to read what I wrote about it, and thank you for putting one of my a line of it on your book, because it meant a lot to me. So if you don't mind me telling about what your book actually meant to me. Okay, and this is about Budgie's release, The Absence, Memoirs of a Banshee Drummer. When the traumatized child finds themselves in the dark reaches of the psyche and desperately longs for a small gesture of tenderness which is denied to them, they will seek out, as a misguided defense mechanism, the biggest monster they can find, often becoming that monster. The absence lays bare the burden of overcoming guilt, shame, loneliness, and the search for validation through art and music, the salves to the universal wounds. Beautifully written, brutally honest, a travelogue of self-discovery by one of the most unique artists still reaching new levels of musical experimentation. That's my buddy Budgie. Welcome. Yeah.
Go get him. Lydia, thank
Well,
you so much, because I was really moved, first of all, because we had spoken a lot. We had 24 hours together on a train. You know, we were captive, and we had a great talk.
I wish it would have been 24 days. We could have really
I would have done that too. That would have been fine.
Well, there's still time. There's still, maybe the Siberian Express, but I don't think we can go
but
there.
you seem to touch on all aspects of everything. All my doubts are kind of encapsulated in what you've written, because you answer it for me. You say it's by maybe finding the monster, then becoming it. That maybe that's just one line that jumps out, because I'm always on the defense, as well as I hope not on the attack, but always thinking, and the part I want to read is to do with I think the self-blame, the taking the responsibility for, and yet it's sounding like self-pity, which is the last thing
which, by the way, the book is not at all self-pitying, in spite of, I mean, you had a traumatic childhood with your mother passing at a very early age. You pretty much were left on your own, and through that loneliness you did find art and music, and that was your go-to, and that's why you became so incredibly multi-dimensional, especially in your drumming. I mean, you had a lot of time by yourself, and especially if you're drumming, parents don't want to hear that, but your dad was gone and your mother was unfortunately very much gone.
Yeah.
So I guess that gave you some liberty to pound away.
It did. My sister would come in and say, "I could hear you at the end of the street." You know that the whole street could hear you.
There, Tim Dahl has joined us.
Well, the thing is, I'm sorry, and I apologize, because it's just I'm at a guest house and all the connections and where you get it, but it's a pleasure to be here. So going to some technical elements about the drums. I mean, you have a big sound, but you also, am I wrong? Are your shells pretty big? I mean, is that kind of one of your trademarks, or is that you just kind of ended up with one?
I stole a lot of drums when of course we did, because we can afford them. So I did gravitate towards bigger drums. I remember seeing people like the Martin Chambers, I think it was, with XTC, and he had huge, big white toms, like on top of a huge bass drum, and I thought, I want drums that big. And I eventually got this. I inherited the kit from Kenny Morris when he jumped ship with the Banshees, and it was just a regular sized kit.
Okay.
And I ended up with a Gretsch kit, which had a 15-inch middle rack tom and an 18-inch floor tom, and it was not by choice. They were the 3-4 drums that were not even a kit. They were just sitting there. Then we had to put them all together. But those, especially those 2 rack toms, the ones that kind of sit on one side of the bass drum, because I saw Rat Scabies, and he had 2 rat toms. He had rat toms, did Rat.
Roar.
And they were always off to one side, and then I figured it out, because Lydia mentioned Hawkwind, and Hawkwind, like other bands of that time, had 2 bass drums. This is real nerd detail now.
No, but I'm curious.
So to get 2 rack toms in the middle of 2 bass drums, you know, the snare drum.
Nerd out, my gents. Yeah, go ahead, nerd out.
The snare drum goes in the middle. The 2 rack toms become in between, like Ginger Baker. In between the 2 bass drums. Then, because you're in punk rock and you can't afford a second bass drum, or it's not cool, you take away the second bass drum, and you're left with a kind of weird setup, and that became my setup. Not because I did have 2 bass drums before I even could play. I used to set drums up just to look at them.
It's funny because
I love the idea. Hang on, Tim. I love the idea of stealing, because in those days, come on, we had to steal everything. We had no money to buy anything. We had to steal what we could, and who has should give, and if they don't, we might have to take. Let's face that.
And going back to you're saying you couldn't afford a second bass drum, or it wasn't cool, and the tribalism and the fashion of wherever your career pigeonholes you, because I know with Lydia and with you actually have a pretty vast interest in wider ranges than what people perceive you to be in. And so, yeah, obviously, I mean, a lot of punk rock, post-punk rockers stuff are into all types of stuff. I can hear it. I mean,
I can't own up to all the stuff that I really listened to, before, because I really wanted. I wanted a huge.
I mean, Tim Dahl has some of the most diverse and worst and best taste in music. You can own up to it. Go ahead, because that was going to be my next question. Hang on.
Yeah.
My next question was going to be because actually you kind of joined the Banshees by accident. You were filling in, and then you were there for decades. But at that time, as a very young man, and playing in the small dive bars that you would with, your early bands, what music were you listening to pre-punk?
Oh, pre-punk. I mean, I could say it was all the Velvet Underground, and I could say, and it was Mark Bolan, and I did hear like White Light, White Heat. But I was
Britain had such good music anyway.
Yeah,
before punk.
I just saw
Britain, the early 70s. Come on.
The early 70s is where I really was woken up into British heavy rock music and great pop chart music as well. So it would go from diverse as Hot Chocolate and Everyone's a Winner Baby, that's for sure. Hawkwind, Silver Machine, and then we get like Atomic Rooster, and then we'd get Deep Purple, and then we get Sabbath. But everybody's
what about Cockney Rebel? Nobody seems to ever mention Cockney Rebel.
Come up and see me sometime, make me smile.
Now I'm on a death trip. Listen to the blood trip.
Which is so Cockney Rebel were slightly left or right of maybe Roxy Music.
Stood on Roxy Music. Come on, how influential.
Budgie, I had this epiphany, and it could be way off, and it could even be self-conscious. I heard, I was kind of revisiting stuff. I was Spellbound the other day, and that strumming acoustic guitar, I'm like, this sounds like the Moody Blues. It sounds like I'm just a singer of a rock and roll band. I know that whole thing.
There's a song by the Moody Blues. I can hear it, and I can almost see, and then I want to switch it off, because
I mean, yeah, exactly. So it's probably directly not influenced, but just all this is in the air, and you're soaking. I mean, we all soak up everything. I don't know.
John McGee brought all that. He brought a much bigger knowledge of music than any of us to the table, and literally, but didn't tell us about it. He would just slip things in there, so the Moody Blues could well be present in Spellbound, and we would never have known. I might have known, but I wouldn't have let on either.
So before you slipped into and made the Slits album, what bands were you seeing at the time? And were you in London then, because I know you went from Northern, then you went to Liverpool, and then to London. But what bands were really monumental, like before or during your first performances and recordings?
I think
Wire was amazing.
Wire were down at Eric's club. I saw Wire and couldn't believe it. It had no stage lights. Every song was about a minute.
Great. I saw them live too then, and it was so good.
I saw the Ramones at Eric's, and they pinned me to the back wall with a wall of sound. It was just a massive. And then I saw a very early Clash, and then I saw Clash with Suicide in London. That was Suicide opening for the Clash.
Yeah, we had Marty Rev on, and he was talking about that. And at one point, someone from the audience threw a hatchet at them.
Oh, wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, but that was the thing where with this kind of, again, tribalism, like the headliner, the fans would sometimes just hate everyone else besides the headliner.
You would think, if we're putting on another band, I mean, we try to be very picky about who we're playing with. And by the way, speaking of that, 1313 did once play with the Banshees in Pasadena. I remember that. I don't know if it was only one show. But of course, I continue to do my Suicide tribute in Europe, having them been my first friends. And the music, it seems like it's more embraced now than it was. Nobody's throwing a hatchet at me. Let's talk. Come on. I'm throwing swords from my tongue. Nobody's throwing hatchets.
Alan Vega was picking up plastics and just smacking them against his head, saying, "Look, it doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt. Come on, give me what you got."
Amazing.
That gig turned it around. I couldn't see them very well. I was so drunk that night. I was seeing like 4 Alan Vegas. It was. I remember seeing a lot of him. And then we down at the Vortex. I bumped into probably the Killjoys, the guy, what's his name? He's just put out a memoir of himself. A memoir of himself. I can't
Love
think
the
of his name.
memoirs.
Anyway, it was I love things like Gary Gilmore's Eyes by the Adverts and saw them twice, and of course they had blah 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 blah. The most amazing the bass player that Lemmy really fancied, Gay Advert.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I met her recently for the first time, I think at the Rebellion Festival in Blackville. I love the Buzzcocks, and I still do. And I'm not big on punk rock. I'm no wave. I'm more out. But I do love, I mean, speaking about pop punk perfection, the Buzzcocks. I never
The
saw them.
Buzzcocks
I
were
mean,
they were
come on.
awesome. I saw them. They were doing their 40-year anniversary, and Pete was still alive, and I bumped into each other in Bristol and in New Zealand. I was on tour with John Grant. It was just the fortunate time to be traveling the world with John Grant, just being the drummer in the band again, and meeting up with Pete and Diggle. And wow.
And Then Magazine were amazing.
Right. I came to Magazine more through John joining than being a big fan of, Howard and the band. I was still kind of reeling from the Buzzcocks and the offshoots. Manchester were like over there and we were Liverpool, and never the two shall meet at that time. A healthy rivalry, yeah.
Fair.
But let's get back to your kind of accidental excursion into a decades-long stint with the Banshees, because they were on tour. They had another drummer, and after 2 days, he just like, forget it, I'm out of here. And how did they summon you forth? I mean, because look, this is early days, and at that point, you were playing at Eric's Dive Bar. You did the Slits record. How did they even come to you? And that's amazing.
It was the Slits record. The story gets more convoluted as well, that it was the Slits record that apparently John and Kenny put on in place of the album they just finished recording in some little in-store. But really, I think Neil Stevenson, manager of the Banshees, shared a flat in Bell Street, London, with Paul Cook, Sex Pistols drummer.
Yep.
Paul and Steve Jones, kind of, well, of course, John Lydon was at that point going with Nora, Ariana's mother. So the kind of connections were all there, and so it wasn't much when we'd finished the Slits album, Nora would have heard it, or maybe Ari wouldn't have played it to her. Oh, fuck off, mother. but Paul must have heard it and said, because Nils had asked Paul to go up to Scotland and like, can you save my tour? And Paul said, I'm really not the drummer for that band. He said, why don't you get in touch with this guy? He's just finished the Slits album.
And that's the way.
And I got a phone call. I don't know how he got my number. I don't even know if I had a phone, but I got a phone call.
Nobody had a phone in those days.
I was living somewhere.
The phone box in the hall.
They had a phone. Somebody got in touch with me somehow, and it was literally that. What you doing tomorrow? And I went, nothing.
Did you know at that point that you had this unique style, or were you just like kind of, yeah, okay, I'll do whatever, Yeah.
I would do what I was good at, and because I just, stepping into Palmolive's shoes, because they were big shoes to fill. I knew Palmolive. I knew the Slits were, out of control, and I knew they wanted some kind of solidity in to get this record made. So it was like it was getting the essence of Palmolive and some of her beats and quirks, and kind of like molding them into a kind of more manageable shape. And yet then there was things that Ari wanted, and between Dennis Bovell, the producer, things like FM, where there was this kind of boom, boom, sort of semi-Motown, but more tribal, as you were saying. And it came from me remembering Ginger Baker doing this interview on the BBC and making his drums sound like 24 drums when there was only 4. And the cacophony he made because the microphone couldn't handle the sound. I thought, that's what drums should sound like, a BBC reporter going, do you mind showing us a little what you do, Ginger? And Ginger Baker goes, oh, you want me to play the drums now? And so he then goes, and it's like amazing sound. And I thought it's a cross between Motown and that the dance record of the Slits
Well, yeah,
one.
because it has the impact, it has the attack, but it doesn't have the everlasting Motown reverb. So it's kind of like this explosion that you would
Mm.
get with a cavernous room, but then it kind of gates itself naturally a little bit, at least the way
Yeah.
I
Well,
would hear.
that's what Dennis was using. I didn't recognize some of the drum parts when I heard the mixes. You know, think of So Tough, and the drums sound like they're in a little tin can, and with all the bass turned off, which is a real dub trick. He was working with Linton Kwesi Johnson at the same time in
Okay.
London, and double time with us, and we didn't know that. But we were getting, he was feeding me with like dub tricks and saying it's got to be rock steady, but don't push the choruses like you usually do, And so these little hints and tricks were kind of being fed to me. And whilst also I was pushing myself, this is my first big recording thing, first major label.
And
And
coming really out of no, I mean, coming from the basement of Liverpool, I
yeah,
mean, this was really, and at the time, of course, I mean, people were recording, they were doing stuff, they were making bands. They had no idea what the impact would be, how long it would go on for, what would happen, where it would lead, or how effective it would still be 40 years later. Just had
yeah.
no clue. You did what you did.
I was given the choice in the studio. It was called Ridge Farm, and they said, "Okay, well, Paul Thompson from Roxy Music usually sets up over there, and Simon Kirke from Free or Bad Company sets up over here. That's his. What do you want to be?" And I'm going, Simon Kirke and Paul Thompson, two of the guys I've been listening to since I was 12. you know,
Right.
all right now, and and every drum fill that Paul Thompson did on every Roxy Music album that I just
And
thought,
Roxy Music was so fantastic in their heyday. I mean, I got to see them when Jerry Hall was singing with them in
wow.
Upstate as a teenager. It was phenomenal. I mean, I still love In Every Dream House. It's one of my favorite
Oh, and every
previous
dream
songs ever.
home, a
And
heartache.
Every Dream
I
Home.
didn't choose their drum positions. I thought, I can't possibly sit in the same place and assume the role. So I sat underneath the control room because it's kind of here. There's like a bit of a staircase down and a staircase underneath, and it was all stone. It was a bit like what I eventually found out was the way they designed the townhouse studios, what Virgin,
Townhouse, yeah,
yeah, and
which was interesting because well, that's what, but that also had a different with Hugh Padgham, that whole
mm,
redirecting that Neve board in the
we're getting into
talkback,
the details now.
you know, the
But
talkback box. But
Phil
that's kind of
Collins
incredible. Yeah,
has got a
exactly.
lot to answer for, really, and
Yeah,
give him his
Oh,
dues because Phil was, as the singer, probably not the drummer with Genesis, but the singer with Genesis in the newly sort of reformed, and we were hankering for the Peter Gabriel kind of craziness, and he was making them into a viable
oh.
commercial prospect,
By the way,
but
Budgie, I
he,
saw The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway also as a teenager. And it was, people didn't realize it's so dystopian, that record. It
oh,
really is futurist. The production was futurist. I am
yeah,
not a fan of prog or even early Genesis, but that album and that performance
yeah.
was amazing.
I
It
saw
was
that at
really,
Liverpool
and
Empire. Yeah.
you saw it.
Yep, yep. It was that one week, and the next week it was Barclay James Harvest, and I lost all hope.
hey, going back to what you were saying, you were instructed a little bit like, hey, don't push the chorus and all that. When you were kind of green going in the studio and you'd get these little advice hints, how much did that affect your live performance? Because we all know like you take something to the road and the adrenaline, and then
Uh,
things kind of take their own form. And
well, yeah.
I mean, how
It's.
much?
I think you quickly realize you don't have that control, but what you do have is the discipline you've picked up in the studio. Certainly with the Slits record, was I knew the songs and the arrangements inside out. We'd
Right.
actually played a lot live as well because we were opening for the Clash on their Sort It Out tour around Britain with another. Oh, what were they called? They're an American band with guitarists from Jane County's band. Oh, the Van Ottens, Wayne or
Don't,
Wayne Van Outen?
don't
Van
remember
Outen.
that one.
No,
Yeah.
Greg Van Dyke, something like that. Anyway, they were called the Innocents.
Ah,
And anyway, they opened for us opening for the Clash. And
But doing live shows gives you the endurance, and the studio gives you the technique.
Exactly that. You have to keep the power up to the end, not powering through to the end, but they kind of, it's as strong. Yeah, as strong, and keeping the adrenaline in check in a way. Because when you don't,
and you burn yourself out on the third song. Exactly. Yeah. But just going into the Banshees, which already had their own clique, and you're coming in as the outsider, how did that feel at first? I mean, were you just like, oh wow, this is amazing, or were you? It had to be a bit frightening.
Yeah, definitely. It was a world I didn't know. They were in nice hotels. I'd never been in, like a 3-star.
Because they came up so quick.
They came quick. Once they got signed, it took them like 2-3 years to get signed. But once they were on their second album, and they were about to go to tour the States for the first time. That tour never happened because the label didn't fancy the second album very much. So a good excuse was the band have split. That's not the real band. Let's just pass on this. So it took the Banshees a long time to get to America. It wasn't until Juju, I think, which was after Kaleidoscope, So it took a while. So we became a different band than the one I'd stepped into. But I'd stepped into a world of a well-oiled crew, oiled in many ways. They were Motorhead's crew, and we had Motorhead's lighting guys, Motorhead's sound guys.
Funny.
Yep. So we shared.
I think you had my boyfriend at one point, at Murray Mitchell at the time, as one of your roadies as well.
Oh yes, you abducted Murray. We lost him for about a month.
Well, it was all.
He came back a better man, though. He came back. He left us as a boy, and he came back, and his voice had dropped 3 octaves.
I didn't realize I interrupted anything, but I became back a better man. That's what I set out to do.
Yes, and he's still going strong, as far as I know.
He is. He's still lovely.
Yes. So I landed in. They had Mick Murphy was the driver and security guy. Driver and security. Well, I'd never. That was what the Osmonds had.
He was
a big, gentle giant, and he had one of these, let me get it right, it's a Dodge Ram, an American vehicle, one of those huge people carriers, we call them in Europe, and it had air conditioning so cold that frost came out of the air conditioning units. It had aircraft seats in it, which were tooled leather, and they went round through like 180 degrees so you could face in different directions.
Swivel around.
So we came off the stage of the Liverpool Empire, and it was literally police cordon, screaming fans. It was the Osmonds hit, and jump into the van, still soaking wet, and off. Yeah. And I thought, I've arrived somewhere. Now what do I do? So get to the hotel, and I thought, well, where is everybody? Where's the party? And eventually I found it. It was in my room.
Well, and that went on for a while, I imagine.
Or anybody else who was unfortunate enough, to
Budgie, why don't you read us a passage from your book and the absence?
How much do you stop me when you've heard it before? But how much do you want me to read? Because
nobody's heard it. I mean, nobody's heard it on this podcast before, so we're all anxiously awaiting. Just give us. I'll signal you.
Okay, do, because it's quite a long one, and I've not chosen it for any particular reason, except I've probably only read some of these chapters once when I read the audiobook. Right. I don't mean I've only read them once, but actually. Right. Trying to get my head around them and read them, it's quite a different thing.
Just give us what you got, darling.
Okay, this chapter is kind of getting on towards the thin side of the book. It's chapter 20.
What does that mean, the thin side of the by the end of it?
Well, the end, right?
More than 2/3 through. Well, what if I chose the same passage that I want to read that you're going to read? That would be amazing. But anyway, please.
On my tour, I started with the prologue and the epilogue, which are like. The room went quiet, and I thought, "Oh shit! I've stopped everybody. People were in tears. People were angry." So I thought I could find chapter 20. The constellations are upside down. It refers to my making a phone call to my dear dad from Australia. That's not what the story is about, but that's what the title is about.
Here we go.
It starts, and here it goes. It was New Year's Eve, the end of 1995, not long after I had stopped drinking. The silk prayer ribbon was still clinging to my wrist. The color had faded, but its significance remained strong. It was a small party at a friend's apartment in the Pigalle district of Paris. The people were relaxed, conversation was light, and flowed as freely as the bison grass vodka. Newly sober, I was still sensitive to drinking, counting the number of drinks others were consuming, not to be judgmental, but to gauge how the evening was going. I soon relaxed and gave up on that. It didn't seem like anyone had overdone it, and I was happily chatting quietly, eating canapé. Why would I be counting units? After midnight, the celebrations outside in the streets began to quieten down. We said our goodbyes and headed out into the Parisian night. I didn't think to call a taxi. I'd just hail one on the street. It would only be a short ride back to the hotel. But there were no taxis. Walking to what looked like a main avenue, I wasn't sure which direction to go in. She was already struggling to stay on her feet. Then the intense cold hit her like a mainline general anesthetic. She slumped down on the pavement, comatose. Her breathing was becoming shallow, and I was shaking with tiredness, cold, and fear. I could neither lift nor move her, and the few passing revelers were of no help. How was I going to get her off the street? This cold could kill. I then became aware of a large shadow looming over me. Without speaking, the shadow slung her over their shoulder and began to walk. I may have said the hotel name, but I don't recall speaking. The large figure moved silently and steadily through the twisting streets of Montparnasse until they came to the hotel. The room was several flights above street level, but the big figure didn't stop until they had safely laid the body down on the bed. Then they turned to leave. "Wait, please. Who are you?" The figure replied, "I work for an airline company." Where else would an angel work? It was not hard for me to believe that this was a celestial visitor, especially recalling how the aftermath of my flight to South America had me knocking on death's door, pleading to be allowed in. The constant question that gnawed like a hungry rat: who am I? I spent a lot of time dwelling on what might or might not have transpired at the end of the Banshees, and how much was my fault. The incident on the plane was a useful scapegoat. I wondered why there had been no conversation about Siouxsie and Severin continuing as a two-piece. They had, after all, been the enduring core of the Banshees. Perhaps I really wasn't expendable. Siouxsie certainly kept me around, so I must have had my uses. Once I quit drinking, there was obviously a big change to our lifestyle in France. An alcoholic in recovery can develop a nurturing need. I would walk around thinking, "I know exactly how you feel. I'll do that for you." When out at restaurants together, I pretended to drink, even lifting the glass to my lips, because I didn't want people to think she was drinking alone. We would still order a carafe of wine and would still stay behind for a digestif with the owner. Siouxsie seemed to be angry that I was sober, and I was angry because I was sober. Angry because people annoyed me. They jostled me or pushed me in busy bars, which was rather hypocritical, given what I would get up to when I'd had a few too many. But I couldn't stand unpredictable drunken antics. They really scared me. It's a common misunderstanding that it's not the first drink that gets you, but the second or the sixth or the seventh. My alcoholic radar for spotting real drinkers in a crowded bar was always accurate. I became just as adept at knowing when the first drink was leading to a bender. I didn't mind being the nominated driver. I had, after all, taken control of driving duties. It was knowing how difficult it would be to get her out of the bar and into the car. The responsibility emphasized my sobriety, and only added to my growing plea of, woe is me, I was alone in my self-pity. We quickly sank into a pattern. On Saturday morning, I would drive 30 minutes to the industrial-sized supermarket in the next big town to buy wine and food, but also simply to have something to do. I tended the garden, made the fire, carried in the logs. I'd not see Siouxsie until maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. After that, I'd try to stay out of the way, keep a safe distance, not because I felt any physical danger, but to avoid the discomfort of engagement, having to talk about the situation, or worse, some form of cross-examination. Any chat would often get darker as the day progressed. On a good night, I would cook dinner, we'd play backgammon, there'd be wine, more wine, and then the phone calls would begin. I could handle this routine, as it also meant that my morning would be quiet, but on a deeper level, an unhealthy codependency was developing. When we moved to France, Siouxsie had mostly given up driving. I chose and bought the cars and chauffeured her around. I began to feel guilty that I had disenfranchised her from driving and decision-making, rather than seeing it as a way of me being controlled. It's a form of willing self-sacrifice, putting oneself in the role of victim while being the perpetrator. It's assuming that when things went wrong, it was primarily my fault, overcompensating for the lack of engagement, empathy, or just laziness. I've recently discovered that this behavioral pattern is called passive dependency, most common in a relationship involving two people who have been traumatized, where one has grown up with a lack of love and the other has had too much love. Siouxsie and I fitted these patterns. She used to have a wind-up musical box, its brass lid a model of a twin-spired church. It played a nostalgic German tune called O mein Papa. She took the melody and lyrics, originally about a young woman remembering her beloved father, a once famous clown, and rewrote them for Mother, O mein Papa, a song on the Banshees' second album, Join Hands. Siouxsie wrote about an evil mother who gave life and who both gives and sucks away vital energy and ends up smothering her children. Yet she concludes with a translation from the original German, "Oh, my papa, to me he is so beautiful, always the same." Perhaps somewhere in that lyric and in that juxtaposition is a clue to the Siouxsie persona. The father who died a sick alcoholic and was valorized, and the mother who survived and, despite loving and caring for her brood, was demonized. This came out when she was drunk. The switch was flipped and the anger was unleashed. John Klein recounts witnessing Siouxsie switch personalities within the blink of an eye. She's Gemini, and there's definitely two of her. It wasn't always aimed at me, but it was an anger that I could feel. It was a litany of, men are awful, doctors are not to be trusted, how dare my dad die? And then the inevitable accusation, you're just like my dad. That's what manifested when she got drunk and angry. The rage came up and she lashed out. It was then that I understood what had brought Siouxsie and me together. A rage at the world for taking a parent, an absence neither of us had ever dealt with except through alcohol and the intoxicating power of our codependency.
So beautifully written. I'd like to follow it with a small passage that is not long after that sums it all up as you just did beautifully. This is to quote Budgie from The Absence. I always saw the dark side of the funny side that plays too hard, or the funny side that wants to strangle everyone with affection. Boo Boo was my pet name. She might tickle me under the chin and go, "Oh, Boo Boo." It felt so patronizing, and that affectionate humor was always the first sign of the emerging dark side. It was like an old horror film of a werewolf transformation. The eyes are always the last to change. The eyes that are beckoning and pleading, still shining with love, suddenly get taken over by the demon. There's still a smile, but physically they get stronger and clumsier and suddenly dangerous. As the love flickers out of the eyes, anything can take its place. Accusations fly, disrespect and bile follows. It appeared like a whirlwind that could blow deep into the night. As John Klein vividly remembered on Nocturne, she says something like, "Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm schizophrenic, and so am I." On big drinking nights, you'd see her nod and her eyes would shut, but when they opened again, there would be someone else inside. Siouxsie was a cross between the lovely big sister I had never had and the worst headmistress you could imagine. And I think those two passages sum up your power and the potential you invigorated in yourself to overcome something that is, like so many tragic love affairs, codependent, almost impossible to break out of, but you did find, through whatever force of your own, what had to be done and how devastating it was. And I love what you said about someone having not enough love and someone having too much love. And it is always the singer that has too much love anyway, or expects it. Myself, leave me the fuck alone. But that's so astute, and this book is so beautifully written and so vulnerable, and also such a good lesson in just overcoming things that people are hesitant or reticent to talk about, like the shame, the guilt, the loneliness, the self-persecution. And thank you so much, Budgie.
Oh, thank you.
I adore you, my friend. Really, I'm so happy you're in the position you're in now. You're happy. Now let's talk about the present music you're doing. By the way, I love the album Los Angeles. It was really great. A lot of different singers, different music, great videos. You have your podcast still going. Is your book tour over, or is that still on?
I think we're about to start the second leg. That's what I'm doing right now.
When you're coming to the US, can I help? I'll gladly be the opening act.
This is my first US little venture, really. Thank you for
get you
getting
some more
me
gigs
on. I think I'm gonna be. It's a smaller imprint. It's still a part of the big company that runs White Rabbit, not one that runs them. Hachette is the big
which
cheese.
Is a great label. Yeah, they do a lot of great publications.
So it's going to come in out on I'm going to get the name wrong. I think it's Amoeba, but it's not Amoeba. That's the name of a record store.
Akashic.
It's like Utopia. Oh God, they're going to kill me.
It's coming out.
It's coming out soon anyway. It's going to be released
in America.
In America, October 17. That's the date they've got planned. And so October, August, September, October. It'll be November, I think. And pending, the customs and what's called border security letting me in. It all should be fine. I'd love to get over because
I'd love to smuggle you in, but I don't have pockets in my pay. You're just a little too big to be smuggled in.
You mentioned all the things that were going on at the same time. I was writing this book. It was becoming real. The podcast is what Lol and I had just put out there as a kind of an idea of how we might develop something new for each other. And it introduced us to some favorite people from our past and some people we'd never spoken to. And that was a kind of a dream gig. But
like this podcasts are very important because we don't have our Bibles used to be NME, Sounds Magazine, Rock Scene, Circus Magazine, Cream. And now we have, for instance, our collective podcast, which just feature the stubbornly relentless artistic innovators.
Yeah. We haven't done it for a while because I've had to really focus on the book. And prior to that, at the same time, we started an album. And that was right in lockdown. We did all the basic tracks and then nobody could travel. And that gave us the opportunity to farm some tracks out and see if anybody was interested. And the interest came. It wasn't going to be an album of songs and vocal and lyric. It was just going to be like a Evening Star Frippanino type thing. That's what that was our little template. And it grew into something we hadn't expected. And then to travel with it, to bring this to the stage, we realized was going to be something that wasn't quite within our grasp at that time. We did what we could.
So many people involved, but I mean, it's beautifully diverse. Every song is great. The videos were great. But I want to go back to something you said earlier that I'm just remembering about how the Velvet Underground were influential. And then you got to play, you were doing a tour where you were playing with the Banshees and playing with John Cale, not the easiest man
The Creatures and John Cale together. Yes.
I mean, I'm so sorry to hear that.
So you as a drummer, as an actual musical accompanist, you're also accompanying a lot of heavy drinkers, because John was a heavy drinker as well. So
yes, but not when we were working with him.
Not when you were, because we had Dougie Bound earlier on, and he was talking about that. But yes, interesting. Okay, all right. So go ahead.
Dougie Bound, who played on Queen of Siam, and George Scott, who was in Dead Spy, both played with John Cale. George Scott pied John Cale in the face when he wanted to quit the band because he was such a monster. But
we met John and Lou backstage at the Paris Olympia, and it's on the Velvet's kind of reunion thing, and they were about to go to America and open for U2 in the mega domes, and we were talking to Mo Tucker and Sterling Morrison, and because John and Lou were not around, and Mo, I was going, Mo, you're just the most amazing drummer. I'm not worthy. And she's going, I get out of here. Where's Siouxsie? Yeah. My daughter wants her autograph. And I was going, oh, okay. And then Sterling was going, I just want to get on the bus. I got a beer, and like Lou and John won't let me on the bus, And it's like, and we go, oh, have a drink with us. But I wasn't drinking either at that point. And when I met John, I wasn't drinking. In fact, I remember rehearsals for the 4 songs that John produced for the Banshees' last album. And I was really like this two-headed thing, like trying to stay off the booze, which wasn't hard, but give me a sniff of a drink and I was like, oh, I could.
Paris 1919 was a kind of amazing John Cale album.
Yeah.
And Fear is a Man's Best Friend, an amazing song.
Yeah. Slow Dazzle we loved. Is it Slow Dazzle?
Yeah. Absolutely great. But I mean, besides even like, go ahead, Tim.
No, but so finish up. I want to hear the follow up to this story. You're saying.
So we had we'd met. We got an invitation from John's manager. I forget her name, but anyway, and John wanted
Friedman?
to do. I think it may be John's partner as well.
Okay, doesn't matter.
I can't remember. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's not that important. She got in touch with us, and Siouxsie and I had done. We'd done Animus. So this would be the first Creatures album after Boomerang. We always took like 10 years not to do them, but 10 years before we had got the next chance to do a Creatures album. And we didn't know we'd even have an audience out there. So we accepted this invitation to do a double-headed tour with John Cale. And what we ended up doing was sharing the band. So I was on stage the whole night. And so was John's guitarist and the bass player we had, which was Susan Stenger from the Band of Susans. So she came in, and there was going to be somebody else with us, but somebody left us in the lurch at the airport. So there was 3 musicians on stage, and then John came on and did his 2-3 songs, and then he'd go off, and Siouxsie would come on. We'd do some Creatures songs, and then we kind of get together, and I think we did like Venus in Furs at the end, with assorted accompaniment from.
By the way, I mean, people need to go back. Everybody knows the Banshee records, but people need to go back and revisit the Creatures album, which I did while I was reading your book, The Absence, and it's just so inventive and so interesting and so groovy.
It was.
And also, you wrote a lot of the thing people might not know is you wrote a lot of lyrics.
I did around Boomerang because and Feast, there was a few on there. That was the first Creatures record, but Feast was. I listened back sometimes more now than I did a few years ago, but it was like just a dance record. It was a dance record with lots of kind of vocalizations, not necessarily long, in-depth lyrics. And it was done in Hawaii. It was done in 2 weeks. Yeah. And we did it. I got the receipts somewhere. You know those things you dig up when you're doing like research for a memoir. Or a book?
That's the mastery of it, is that I don't want to call it improvisational, but a lot of it was made on the spot.
It was totally improvised on the spot.
That's what's so innovative about it.
Yeah. I literally, the song, the drum tracks lasted as long as I could hold the sticks until they flew out of my hand because it was so humid. And we give a cassette tape, as it was, give it to Siouxsie. She'd been like a beach hut. Well, it was like something to do with the hotel nearby. And she'd just write lyrics to this drum beat and picking out maybe a melody. And then they give me something to play on the marimba. And really, it was done and mixed within that 2-week period with photographs. And
that's fun.
Yeah. And that's how records can be done. That's when records can be done, when you're either in the zone or you know what you're freaking doing.
Yeah, we didn't, but we were definitely in a zone.
You were in the zone. And so you're in the zone or you know what you're doing.
So, go ahead.
I was wondering what happened to John Cale. He's in there somewhere.
Well, just go
going
to John Cale.
Album last year. No, he released a new album last year, John Cale.
He did. Though. No, yeah. With us, we did a song together. We played together. I know what I was going to tell you. I don't know if the story made it into the book, but it's like on tour with John Cale. I wasn't drinking. I was being a good boy. John was like getting a little bit upset about things, like, okay, the Bat Lounge is going to be mine and no smoking. And Siouxsie did not like this idea of Bat Lounge, mine, no smoking. So I do recall her running onto the bus one night, late, and opening curtains on your bunk on the bus and opening a big drag of cigarette into his bunk. And he leapt out and told the driver, stop this bus. And like we're in the middle of the desert, probably on the way to Las Vegas or something, long drive. And I see John, and he looks like he's waving his arms at the side of his face, like he's been chased by a swarm of bees or something, wasps buzzing, get away from me, no, get away. And I really don't know I can't remember the punchline to this, because obviously there was nowhere to go. It was dark.
But he wanted to punch somebody. I know he could be a violent man.
Was it Ian Copeland's agency that booked this?
No,
it wasn't.
Nita,
okay.
Nita is the lady's name. Nita, and I forget her surname now. But I don't think it was anything to do with the Copeland guys, Miles or Ian, who I remember fondly. He's no longer with us. But it was just one of those.
Which is a random one, because I was wondering if it was an economic thing where it was actually the agency that says share the rhythm section rather than an artistic thing.
Yeah, I think the fees were high. I know the fees were high because a lot of people, small clubs, lost some money. And to compensate for that, Siouxsie and I then got our old friend Knox, who was the last Banshees guitarist, and we hastily put together a 3-piece version of the same thing and went back to the same venues to kind of give them a second chance at door money. And
a second chance to lose some money.
We brought the ticket prices down, and the kids came out, and they had a great time, and we had a disastrous time, but it was a lot of fun. Because
now, Budgie, you're in the peak, really, of your happiness. I must be somewhere.
It's what time is it? I now go like, is my little boy, is he about to come home? My daughter, I'm accompanying my daughter on a trip to the UK. I keep them out. I don't go out and have photographs taken with them or anything like that. They won't do that anyway. No, Daddy, stop doing that.
But you live in Berlin. You're married. You have 2 kids. You've got your book out. You're in the best peak of your life, and look at you. You're glowing. And I'm so happy that this book helped you overcome and survive.
All thanks to you, Lydia, for encouraging me to get on and do it. Really.
I'm a cattle prodder, if nothing else. I don't know what I did, but whatever I did, I'm always happy to oblige. Well, you told me a few stories, and I love to hear them. I love to read them, and I thank you for reading them and allowing me to also recite some of the brilliance that's in the absence. And so good luck with that. And I hope that you come to America soon and we can do what we do when nobody sees what we're doing.
I think so. Yeah.
Read each other poetry and stuff.
It wouldn't be right if I didn't get to at least, book soup or somewhere, and meet some people. No, I mean, America's been such a big part. I've always felt pull towards it, and it's always kind of gone, not yet, so maybe this time.
We're here, we're waiting, we're open arms, and can't wait to see you here, my friend. Thank you so much for being part of this
Lydia.
Podcast.
Tim, thank you.
Yes, thank you.